Hi guys, my name is Navya. I'm going to be reading Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. This novel is actually by the same author who has written Pride and Prejudice, a very famous book of hers. This novel is basically a love story about a young heroine named Catherine Morland. She discovers someone she loves while attending the ball in her hometown. It's a very good book, and I hope you enjoy. Okay, I'll start with Chapter 1. No one who had ever seen Catherine Morland in her infancy would have supposed her born to be a heroine. Her situation in life, the character of her father and mother, her own person and disposition were all equally against her. Her father was a clergyman without being neglected or poor, and a very respectable man, though his name was Richard, and he had never been handsome. He had a considerable independence, besides 2 good livings, and he was not in the least addicted to looking up to his daughters. Her mother was a woman of useful plain sense, with a good temper, and what is more remarkable, with a good constitution. She had 3 sons before Catherine was born, and instead of dying in bringing the latter into the world, as anybody might expect, she still lived to have 6 children more, to see them growing up around her, and to enjoy excellent health herself. A family of 10 children will always be called a fine family, where there are heads and arms and legs enough for the number. But the Morlands had little other right to the word, for they were in general very plain, and Catherine, for many years of her life, as plain as any. She had a thin, awkward figure, a sallow skin without color, dark, lank hair, and strong features, so much for her person. And not less unpropitious for heroism seemed her mind. She was fond of all boys' plays, and greatly preferred cricket not merely to dolls, but to the more heroic enjoyments of her infancy, nursing a dormouse, feeding a canary bird, or watering a rose bush. Indeed, she had no taste for a garden, and if she gathered flowers at all, it was chiefly for the pleasure of mischief, at least so it was conjectured, from her always preferring those which she was forbidden to take. Such were her propensities. Her abilities were quite as extraordinary. She never could learn or understand anything before she was taught, and sometimes not even then, for she was often inattentive and occasionally stupid. Her mother was 3 months in teaching her only to repeat the beggar's petition, and after all, her next sister Sally could say it better than she did. Not that Catherine was always stupid, by no means. She had learned the fable of the hare and many friends as quickly as any girl in England. Her mother wished her to learn music, and Catherine was sure she would like it, for she was very fond of tinkling the keys of the old forlorn spin-net, so at 8 years old she began. She learnt a year and could not bear it, and Mrs. Morland, who did not insist on her daughters being accomplished in spite of incapacity or distaste, allowed her to leave it off. The day which dismissed the music master was one of the happiest of Catherine's life. Her taste for drawing was not superior, though whenever she could obtain the outside of a letter from her mother, or seize upon any other odd piece of paper, she did what she could in that way, by drawing houses and trees, hens and chickens, all very much like one another. Writing and account she was taught by her father, French by her mother, and her proficiency in either was not remarkable, and she shirked her lessons in both whenever she could. What a strange, unaccountable character! For with all of these symptoms of profligacy at 10 years old, she had neither a bad heart nor a bad temper, was seldom stubborn, scarcely ever quarrelsome, and very kind to the little ones, with few interruptions of tyranny. She was moreover noisy and wild, hated confinement and cleanliness, and loved nothing so well in the world as rolling down the green slope at the back of the house. Such was Catherine Morland at 10. At 15, appearances were mending. She began curl her hair and longed for balls. Her complexion improved. Her features were softened by plumpness and color. Her eyes gained more animation, and her figure more consequence. Her love of dirt gave way to an inclination for finery, and she grew clean as she grew smart. She now had the pleasure of sometimes hearing her father and mother remark on her personal improvement. "Catherine grows quite a good-looking girl. She is almost pretty today," were words which caught her ears now and then, and how welcome were the sounds! To look almost pretty is an acquisition of higher delight to a girl who has been looking plain for the first 15 years of her life than a beauty from her cradle can ever receive. Mrs. Morland was a very good woman, and wished to see her children everything they ought to be, but her time was so much occupied in lying in and teaching the little ones that her elder daughters were inevitably left to shift for themselves, and it was not very wonderful that Catherine, who had by nature nothing heroic about her, should prefer cricket, baseball, riding on horseback, and running about the country at the age of 14 to books, or at least books of information, for provided that nothing like useful knowledge could be gained from them, provided they were all story and no reflection, she had never any objection to books at all. But from 15 to 17 she was in training for a heroine. She read all such works as heroines must read to supply their memories with those quotations which are so serviceable and so soothing in the vicissitudes of their eventful lives. From Pope she learned to censure those who bear about the mockery of woe. From Gray that many a flower is born to blush unseen, and waste its fragrance on the desert air. From Thomson that it is a delightful task to teach the young idea how to shoot, and from Shakespeare she gained a great store of information, among the rest that trifles light as air are to the jealous confirmation strong as proofs of holy writ, that the poor beetle, which we tread upon, in corporal sufferance, feels a pang as great as when a giant dies, and that a young woman in love always looks like a patient on a monument smiling at grief. These are basically just quotations from the books Catherine loves to read. So far her improvement was sufficient, and in many other points she came on exceedingly well, for though she could not write sonnets, she brought herself to read them, and though there seemed to be no chance of her throwing a whole party into raptures by prelude on the pianoforte of her own composition, she could listen to other people's performances with very little fatigue. Her greatest deficiency was in the pencil. She had no notion of drawing, not even to attempt a sketch of her lover's profile, that she might be detected in the design. There she felt miserably short of the true heroic height. At present she did not know her own poverty, for she had no lover to portray. She had reached the age of 17 without having seen one amiable youth who could call forth her sensibility, without having inspired one real passion, and without having excited any adoration but what was very moderate and very transient. This was strange indeed. But strange things may be generally accepted, for if their cause can be fairly searched out, there is not one lord in the neighborhood, no, not even a baronet. There is not one family along their acquaintances who had reared and supported a boy accidentally found at their door, not one young man whose origin was unknown. Her father had no ward, and the squire of the parish had no children. But when a young lady is to be a heroine, the perverseness of 40 surrounding families cannot prevent her. Something must and will happen throw a hero in her way. Mr. Allen, who owned the chief of the property about Fullerton, the village in Wiltshire, where the Morlands lived, was ordered to Bath is just a more urban town in this book, was ordered to Bath for the benefit of a gouty constitution, and his lady, a good-humoured woman, fond of Miss Morland, and probably aware that if adventures will not befall a young lady in her own village, she must seek them abroad, invited her to go with them. Mr. and Mrs. Morland were all compliance, and Catherine all happiness. Okay, thank you for listening. In the next chapter, we're gonna read more about Catherine going to the ball in Bath with Mrs. Allen and who she meets there. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next time. Bye.